Welcome back to my disembodied voice. The past few weeks, me and Mrs. Crow have been catching up on the inoffensive Australian soap opera Home and Away as we've fallen behind with it. Now, for those who don't know what Home and Away is, it's a daily portion of soap opera drama from down under, set in a bay where Abercrombie and Fitch models, Victoria's Secret cover girls and AI-shaped OnlyFans influencers live in a seaside bay and interact with each other on a near microcosmic level. They never celebrate Christmas or cook at home and are always seen eating in the local pier restaurant Salt. But despite their blood cholesterol levels surely being cardiotoxic, they continue to look like sun-kissed gods. Oh, and every few weeks a stalker, explosion, weirdo appears in the bay, catastrophe happens, and someone either dies or goes to hospital and ends up in a coma. Also, it's the home of Alf Stewart, the legendary man who seemingly runs the whole bay like some kind of Australian Jesus. Home and Away has given us some very famous names. Thor himself, Chris Hemsworth, was once a Bay regular, and so was Scream Queen Samara Weaving, who played troubled teen Indy. Now, a storyline currently going around is all about young Lacey, played by the very beautiful Sophia Pennington, being stalked by a man called Holden. Now, don't get me wrong, Sophia Pennington is a very worthy crush, but what happens when becomes something much darker, more intense, more dangerous, more obsessive? And staying with Home and Away briefly, the thumbnail for today's video is of actress Jackie Purvis, who played Felicity Newman on Home and Away, and, in my subjective opinion, she is my favourite ever character, both emotionally and aesthetically, to ever appear in the programme. Now, I bring that up because, whilst I'm a little taken with Jackie Purvis, I have no desire to seek her out or make her mine. I am simply a fan. So, as we go deeper into this video essay, it felt right to take someone that I really like and fancy and put them in the thumbnail and then base the video essay around how attraction and love in storylines and movies goes from something happy to something very, very dark indeed. So, for this video essay, I thought that thumbnail was perfect because it showed that sometimes you can be fanatical about something and it doesn't make you dangerous, just a fanatical simp. Wait, hang on. Is that how people see me? Hang on, can we just re-edit this bit, please? Because I don't like the idea of being called a simp. I mean, it makes me sound like a right twat. So, with that all explained, join me for today's video as we look at love, limerence, madness and obsession and take a deep dive into the psychological roots of when something wonderful like love and fantasy turns into insanity. Or when we go from no longer admiring or adoring someone and instead we just get
obsessed. Calvin Klein.
Now, as ever, let me climb the crow's nest and shout spoilers ahoy for any show or film we discuss today and look at our flow-through chart, which, ironically, is the title of today's video, which is Love, Limerence, Madness, Obsession. Right then, let's crack on. Okay, so before we get to the darker side of love, we must first look at why we fall in love. Now, love is a big word and something which encompasses many things. We love our friends and family. We love our favourite songs and movies, and we also love our partner, wife, husband or mail-order bride from Thailand. We can also love objects. After all, I have a very complex and deep loving relationship with the McRib. And since I first ate it in the late 1980s, I have gorged myself to pre-diabetes every time it returns for a limited run in the UK. And in the movies, love has been one constant through time as stories are told, retold, reimagined, and it's often the centre, focus point of every relationship of every romantic comedy, action movie, horror, drama, and science fiction because, as humans, we seek companionship and have a natural proclivity towards attraction of a certain type. And whatever your type is, great. That's your gift to have. I think we've established what mine is. And we can love someone we haven't even met or just have on our wall as a poster because love is such a huge and all-encompassing word. Take myself back in the 1990s when I was listening to alternative music and one of my favourite bands called Lush. Now, I love Lush so much that the opening song to my video these days is from their song Ocean and the performance at Live at the Dome. Red-headed Mickey Berenyi has long been a sex symbol and a bit of an infatuation for me, but I know this is just fandom and adoration, and I know I'm never going to meet her, and despite my prized autographed CD, I can separate my fantasy and feelings from obsession because I'm just a fan. But talking about that is a good starting point for our journey, and so we come to the first point of our flow-through chart as we go from the normal to the abnormal, and we start with a look at love. Love is a profoundly intricate and multifaceted emotional practice. Love manifests through devotion, shared experiences, and the desire for closeness, forming the backbone of meaningful relationships. The intensity and richness of love make it one of the most significant aspects of the human experience. Right back from early Shakespeare scripts to novels throughout history to the days of early cinema to the current onslaught of streaming content which overwhelms from every angle, love is everywhere. Be it the Prince with Snow White, Spider-Man and MJ, or even Jim protecting Celine and Hannah from Doctor Who's thugs in 28 Days Later, the reason we love film is because it deals with the fundamental affection we all feel when one feels a deep sense of care and warmth towards another. This affection, be it platonic or sexual, or in the case of the McRib, gluttonously sinful, is complemented by intimacy, closeness, and a trust that develops as people share their lives and their vulnerabilities. Now, passion is also a vital element of love when we come to the sexual side of physical intimacy, as this brings excitement and desire into a relationship and brings us closer to someone. And commitment is another fundamental aspect when we talk about love, as it represents the intention to maintain and nurture the bond over time. Together, all of these qualities foster a strong and enduring attachment, a powerful feeling that binds people together. Now, love encompasses a spectrum of emotions and behaviours, including tenderness, devotion, and the persistent sense of connection that can withstand the tests of time and challenging circumstances. And nobody does love better than Disney. Despite their recent awful content with things like Star Wars and the way the MCU has gone, quite simply, in the past, throughout their animated and Pixar times, be it the Prince falling for Snow White romantically, Carl's heartbreaking loss of his wife in the opening montage of Up, or Woody's platonic love for Andy in Toy Story, Disney nails the absolute necessity of companionship, adoration, commitment, and true love. And being Disney, we get all the important aspects of love without any of the crudeness. After all, many wept and smiled at the end of Snow White when true love woke up the protagonist, but we don't need to see the prince trying the wheelbarrow sex position while smacking Snow White's bum on the wedding night. Instead, we stop at the nice, decent part. So we get the essence of true love, pure devotion, and, despite Rachel Zegler's view of seeing the prince as a stalker in the awful remake,
Weird.
the reality is that Snow White is all about devotion, loyalty, desire, honour, and decency, and deep down we all seek validation and connection, and our wish is to be desired. And there's nothing wrong with this, as despite what certain people in Hollywood think, love and adoration does not stifle one's individuality or suppress anyone. Instead, love exalts and makes people better versions of who they are. It makes them more whole. But we've covered love, so let's get a little bit darker and move on, because although love is magical, it's not always reciprocated, and at times it sometimes is reciprocated, but it then has a darker side. Now, I've done a video on stalking, but this isn't about stalking necessarily. It's just about infatuation, obsession, ownership, and a near OCD takeover of once benign emotions that would give a natural and very pleasant response. And this specific takeover of emotions, the altering of brain chemistry, and the slow slide into obsession has a name, and it's called limerence. Obsessive love is associated with insecure attachment and causes cycles of obsession and addiction, which psychologists refer to as limerence. This can even escalate into what is known as dual disorder, where addiction and obsession coagulate, intensifying the emotional turmoil. Now, psychologists draw a clear line between obsessive love and healthy affection. Obsessive love is defined by its unilateral, controlling nature, which often mirrors the characteristics of addiction. And rather than mutual care and respect, limerence is marked by an overwhelming need to possess and control the other person. And this form of love is driven by a chemical imbalance in the brain, specifically low levels of serotonin with heightened dopamine levels and cortisol. These neurochemical changes contribute to persistent intrusive thoughts and compulsive behaviours towards the object of affection. And people experience limerence typically struggle to maintain these compulsions, leading to behaviours that can be difficult to control or understand. So let's take a deeper look at love versus limerence. The term limerence was coined by psychologist Dorothy Tenov in her 1979 book Love and Limerence. Now, let's be clear, limerence is not recognised in the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, nor is it a clinical diagnosis. Instead, it is a concept that has gained interest in recent years. In 2025, in an NPR interview about his book Smitten, The Romantic Obsession, The Neuroscience of Limerence and How to Make Love Last, author and neuroscientist Tom Bellamy explained the shift from attraction to limerence by stating that the focus was on a limerent object. He also stated that if the object wasn't bonded with, the tensions and obsession would escalate. So we have our first pathway here. Love can lead to limerence, and that has an object. Now, if for any reason you can't bond with that, or it's disconnected, or you can never attain love, reciprocal love with that object, it becomes something more obsessive. So, limerence can become all-consuming, overwhelming, and obsessive, and whilst love is often considered the deepest of shared human emotions, limerence is a distinct individual experience characterised by an involuntary obsession with another person. Limerence can overwhelm an individual, becoming all-consuming and obsessive. Research published in 2021 highlights the consequences of limerence, including substantial loss of productivity and emotional distress, which can disrupt someone's daily life and hinder the formation of future healthy relationships. The study identifies behaviours such as engaging in rituals that interfere with responsibilities, like staring at photos of the limerent object, replaying past interactions, and seeking clues about the limerent object's feelings. Additionally, perceived approval or rejection from the limerent object can provoke intense emotional reactions ranging from elation to despair. Now, with love, you know the person loves you back, but with limerence, this is ambiguous and often causes fantasy, obsession, and the desire to own, conquer, and possess the person rather than have a shared connection. And that desire to conquer and possess is where the addictive side comes in that we mentioned with dual disorder. So not only are you fascinated with the individual, but you are completely and utterly overtaken by them, looking at photos of them all the time, continuously reliving things, and unless you're doing that, you're not getting that huge dopamine kick, and that's where the addiction side comes in. Now, in the movies 500 Days of Summer and The Crush, we have two levels of limerence. In 500 Days of Summer, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is in love with Summer, but the feeling is not reciprocated. Joseph Gordon-Levitt goes through this one-way relationship of sex and discovery, but there's no real connection there, and instead he has the central feature of limerence, which is the intense longing for reciprocation, but this never comes. Joseph Gordon-Levitt craves affirmation and emotional response with the limerent object that is summer, and sometimes when he feels that reciprocation is perceived, Joseph Gordon-Levitt experiences moments of ecstasy fueled by the possibility of this growing mutual connection. However, each time he's sort of almost half dumped or kept at arm's length, and he's left to ruminate and go over and try to recapture and reorganise. However, over time, he's always pushed back, kept at arm's length. Things always go wrong, and Summer is quite a cold creature, and so she goes from what he perceives as a shared connection to becoming a limerent object that he obsesses over. In the movie The Crush, we go to a slightly higher level, as Alicia Silverstone is a spoilt teenager and, by American law, a child. Now, she falls for Saw's Carrie Elwes, who is more interested in Jennifer Rubin, who played Taryn in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, and Alicia Silverstone's preoccupation manifests as continuous intrusive thoughts, and this is where Carrie Elwes becomes the limerent object, as Alicia Silverstone merely watches him grow, distant, and form a relationship with a new person. Therefore, the love is not reciprocated. So she goes into a preoccupation of continuous intrusive thoughts about Carrie Elwes, which then dominates her mental landscape. Alongside her obsessional thinking, there's an exaggerated and irrationally positive appraisal of her limerent object's attributes. And this is because the obsessive person perceives the limerent object as flawless or idealised. After a while, Alicia Silverstone falls into emotional turmoil as the desired feelings are not returned, and from that disappointment comes resentment and a sense of emptiness. And this oscillation between euphoria and despair underscores the powerful and often overwhelming nature of limerence, distinguishing it from a more stable and shared form of love. And for Alicia Silverstone, she forges fantasies where she accuses Carrie Elwes of rape, ruins his life, and almost kills his girlfriend with a swarm of bees. And it's all under this delusion that he's going to fall for her, which he never is. The Crush is a great movie when it comes to limerence, as it goes through the 3 stages of limerence, which are infatuation. The individual begins to notice the other person and recognise their positive qualities. Crystallization. The individual experiences the obsessive, anxious, and ecstatic intensity of their feelings. And finally, once Alicia Silverstone loses all sense of reality and truly starts to ruin the life of her limerent object, we head towards deterioration. The idealisation of the object of the individual's limerence begins to wear off, resetting the need for another object to become infatuated with. And this is also shown in the film, as when Alicia Silverstone is finally arrested and taken to a safe place to rehabilitate, she's already found a new limerent object, and so the cycle is destined to repeat. Now, there is actually a 4th stage of limerence, one which is called resolution, but for someone like Silverstone in The Crush, that isn't going to happen, if ever, or at least for a very long time. So the cycle is destined to repeat itself, but the aim is that as she matures and her brain changes and she maybe develops more maturity, she will move past limerence. However, not everyone moves past limerence, and we go from that kind of obsession and infatuation to something a little more darker, which is madness. This is where the arrival fallacy never materialises and winning the object never happens, but under heavy delusion, the affected person will tell themselves that once the limerent object finally falls for them, everything will feel complete. In the horror movie P2, Wes Bentley is a lost lamb of a loser who spends all day locked in a car park, earning probably a minimum wage, whilst very rich people pass him by in their Mercedes and other luxury cars. He has become truly obsessed with Rachel Nichols, and with good reason really, as she is a truly beautiful woman, but he goes far too far and turns her into a limerent object and then descends into madness when he kidnaps her on Christmas Eve. What happens then is Thriller 101, but the point here is that no woman who wakes chained to a chair and having been knocked unconscious, undressed and redressed in a provocative outfit, and then terrorised with a dog is going to suddenly say, "Do you know what? You're actually pretty cute, and I think this can work out. I'm glad you've tortured me, captured me, undressed me, molested me, and chained me to a chair, because it's made me realise how much I love you." In P2, Limerence has all but gone, and we're now firmly in the realm of the delusional. Rachel Nichols is a successful woman who, whilst neglectful of her loved ones and being a workaholic, is a good person and never going to flip her point of view to, well, the man who killed my colleague, chained me up and terrorised me and threatened to kill me is actually a pretty solid foundation for a sexual relationship. In the real world, money, power and those sort of things are good proxies to attract a woman. However, for Wes Bentley, he has none of these things, and instead of a personality which also might become quite enchanting, bewitching and funny, he's just weird. To put it simply, Wes Bentley's brain is broken and there is no reasoning with someone who is lost to fantasy and is psychotic in the true definition of the word, which is a complete withdrawal from reality and lost in delusions. He desires Rachel Nichols, but there will never be any sex or happiness between them, just this wanting and desire which leads to a fantasy which remains unbreakable right through the film until the very point where he's about to be burnt to death at the very end. Now, this isn't all about cognitive aspects. Neuroscientist Kent Berridge's research has uncovered a fascinating insight into how the brain processes desire and pleasure, and according to his findings, the neural circuits responsible for wanting our cravings and urges are distinct from those that govern liking, which is the sensation of enjoyment once a reward is obtained. This means that the system that drives us to pursue something isn't the same one that allows us to appreciate and savour it, and for Wes Bentley, he is stuck on the desire continuum with no understanding that the attainment will never come. And the desiring system, fueled primarily by the neurotransmitter dopamine, creates an intense attraction towards a desired person or object and is the force behind behaviours such as repeatedly capturing her and trying to create the fancy in his head that she will come round. Now, more than likely, Wes Bentley has a disjointed attachment style because, in contrast to the dopamine desire system he is stuck in, his liking system would operate through different neurotransmitters such as opioids, and these pathways are responsible for producing the pleasure experienced during genuine connection or reward, which he is never going to get, so he just repeats infatuation and desire and has a crystallized delusion that means his mind is lost to fantasy and not reality. There's going to be no oxytocin or serotonin here. There's just going to be a huge amount of dopamine as he wants, with no concept of how it's never going to be reciprocated, and even if it was, he probably wouldn't know what to do with her. And there are 3 brain regions which orchestrate desire when it comes to this kind of psychotic delusion, desiring and acting out, and they are nucleus accumbens. This processes reward anticipation and motivation. Ventral tegmental area. This helps to release dopamine, and this fuels that wanting desire also connected to anticipation. The prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex creates mental simulations of future rewards, but for someone like Wes Bentley, it's cut off from cognitive logic and overfueled by emotion from limbic brain thinking rather than the rationalization which we all need when we come to loving, desiring, or realizing that we can't have someone. Okay, so we've done love, limerence, madness, so let's bunny boil our way to our final stage of degraded love and come to obsession. Sanity is gone, and there is only a malignant fantasy which, more than just desiring someone, has now taken over every once rational part of the brain, and the former limerent object must be owned, conquered, and, if necessary, killed. Right, pick your movie. Take any movie about obsession, pick any great song about obsession, and you can see the self-destructive path of broken attachment. Now, at the start of this video essay, we talked about healthy love devolving into limerence, then into madness, and so when we come to the point where obsession is so strong and nothing else remains, we need to show how dangerous this can be and how all-encompassing and utterly life-destroying it is. The logical and cognitive parts of the brain are now completely overrun by madness, and there is no critical thinking here, just a tunnel vision focus of the obsessional to own and keep the object forever. Now, in my job, I see many victims of domestic violence, and one phrase haunts me every time I hear it, no matter how many times I hear it. And it often comes when the girl is trying to leave and she hears, "If I can't have you, nobody can." And it's a truly terrifying thing to hear and live with, that you now belong to someone, and if you try to break free from this ownership, you will be killed. And whilst popular culture romanticises love, its darker side has been the root cause of many brilliant films and TV shows. And that's because we're not dealing with love when we come to obsession, we're dealing with a purely malignant desire that consumes people to the point where, upon realising they are never going to have their object, the cognitive dissonance of reality and fantasy colliding causes a schism so severe that there is no coming back from it. And this is where we get the, "If I can't have you, no one will." That's where this comes from, as reality and fantasy cause this dissonance and the individual cannot understand and get past, and therefore, if the person's going to leave, they'd rather kill them. And then that way they retain that level of ownership forever. Now, attachment theory, which was developed by John Bowlby, explains how early relationships with caregivers shape our approach to romantic connections, and individuals with attachment styles characterised by fears of abandonment and the constant need for reassurance are more likely to develop obsessive behaviours in relationships, especially when rejection occurs or someone turns them down. And this addiction-level anxiety can manifest as monitoring a partner's whereabouts, or if the overwhelming fear of rejection takes over their lives, it can encompass absolutely keeping someone in the house and never letting them leave. And such patterns reflect this lack of trust and security, which drives the obsessive thoughts and actions. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, or as you may know it, OCD, can also play a role in love-related obsessions. People with OCD may experience intrusive thoughts about their partner or relationship, leading to compulsive behaviours such as repeatedly checking social media profiles or seeking constant validation that "you're my number one, you're never going to leave me, you don't fancy anyone else, you belong to me." And these actions are attempts to alleviate anxiety, but they merely reinforce the cycle of obsession, making it difficult to maintain a balanced and healthy relationship. And this is where addiction comes into it as well with the dual disorder, because if the limerent object isn't interested, or if the obsessional object is trying to break free, the abuser will increase their controlling levels because they cannot face that cognitive dissonance of reality replacing fantasy. And in the movie Fatal Attraction, Glenn Close does everything to possess Michael Douglas and ultimately destroy him. She tries to kill herself, she boils the family rabbit, threatens him, loses all sense of self and minimises the harm she is doing into a single psychotic delusion that they will be together. And as the rejections increase, so does her behaviour increase, and this is where we head towards the "if I can't have you, then no one will." Glenn Close is insanely jealous, myopic in her outlook, and has an extreme fear of abandonment, which causes her to annex Michael Douglas and fuse his entire persona to herself, so he acts like an extension of her that is owned. And that is both emotionally, spiritually, biologically, and sexually, and she cannot function without him. Gone is the once what she thought reciprocal love, empathy, attraction, and desire, and instead there is just fear, anxiety, over-control, obsessive focus, and insecurity. Love is about companionship. Obsession is about objectification, where the object is little more than the thing to own, consume, and completely rely on, because if rejection should happen, the mind would merely snap. So, in this video essay, we've gone from mutual love and belonging and companionship to owning and destroying and fusing someone as an extension to the self, which can be controlled, and they're no longer a person that can bring mutual happiness and intimacy. They are the object that are the very oxygen needed if life is to continue. From love to madness, from madness to complete irrationality, and from complete irrationality to obsession. And like I said, the fusing of an object is very crucial here, and you'll see this in people who are obsessed and own people. That person is them. They must do everything they say, and they must be consumed. They are annexed, they are taken over, they are absorbed almost. And this is a good metaphor for the cognitive dissonance here. The person is fused and becomes as one. And this is the fantasy. However, when the reality comes through that they are not fused, that they want their own lives and they want to break free, that's where the dangers happen. And that's where many people do actually get killed in domestic violence relationships, or in movies, you have that final fantastic showdown where knives are flying, blood sprays everywhere, and the antagonist is finally banished at the end with a gunshot wound or a stab to the heart. And it's because of this strange duet between love and obsession that we've had great movies for years. Anyway, that's it for this week's video. So remember that psychology is cool.
So cool.
Please like, share and subscribe, as more subs means more vids, and even leave a comment or start a discussion, as healthy debate is always welcome on here. And as ever, until next time, I'll catch you later.